Hey everyone, welcome back to Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build. In these fireside chats, I sit down with people building, backing, and running better workplaces. I'm your host, Curtis Forbes. My guest today is Devin Miller. Devin's an expert in workplace emergency savings. Devin is a financial technology entrepreneur who's built FinTech solutions used by tens of millions of Americans. Today, Devin serves as the CEO at SecureSave. When not working, Devin loves spending time with his wife and 7 exclamation point children. Devin also loves the outdoors, gardening, hiking, skiing, biking, boating. Thank you so much for joining us today, Devin.
Good to be here, Curtis. Glad to be on and excited to have a conversation.
Before we start that conversation, I have to ask, I have 4 kids.
Yeah.
It feels like a million sometimes. You have 7. How are you even upright?
Yeah. I mean, they didn't come at once. So I always joked is my only request is one healthy kid at a time. And we've been, blessed with that. With no twins. Every kid is healthy, happy, thriving. And we live in 5 acres outside of Spokane, Washington. So we live next to a big, 600-acre nature preserve. We've got a big garden. And we push the kids outside as much as we possibly can.
I was going to say, and 5 acres is smart, and that way no one can really hear all of the fighting.
Yes. Well, it's funny. We moved here a few years ago, and the kids were looking at neighborhood, traditional suburban houses and stuff, and trying to find decent sized houses for everybody. Yeah. The kids are like, we're not really neighborhood people. We grew up on acreage. We need acreage, and sometimes they're out in the driveway, and it's just so loud. I'm like, yeah, they were right. We needed some.
Yeah, you made a good decision.
Yeah. I think our neighbors appreciate it too.
So you have a really impressive career in the world of finance and fintech, and you've spent a lot of that time in C-suite. Tell me a little bit about your career path and really kind of what drew you to the world of finance, and don't leave out your time as a vehicle design.
Yeah, well, actually, where it starts, I'm not a traditional financial services person at all. I went to school and built race cars, and it was awesome. Learned, very entrepreneurial background growing up. Building race cars is somewhat of an entrepreneurial experience. You got to raise money. You got to figure out how to build the thing. You got to figure out how to make money off of, the experience and what is classically not a money-making endeavor.
Right.
With the short story, it's also a very human-centered design strategy. Everything around racing is centered around the driver. And, anyway, long story short, graduated college, started working, and my wife started a business in the financial services space. And I ended up joining her in that company and taking it over. And we built that business out. And I found financial services to be very interesting because, people are the center of money. Like, we don't need money unless, we need it. But money is just ones and zeros. It's a very interesting concept.
It's a tool.
It's a tool. And without people, that tool has no usefulness. And so people are really kind of the center of that. So it's very similar in some way. You have to put people at the center of the relationship with money. And money is a very emotional thing. I find it a fascinating area to build, be creative, help people, and have been in the financial services space for about 20 years. And still think about that concept of people being at the center of it. And how do you design for people, design for their emotions, and design for hopefully positive outcomes, which is also about racing. You want to win, you want to have success. And, we think about that for the people we serve. We want them to win in life, and we want them to win in their relationship with money.
Although not spend it as quickly as some racers might race.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Money will come out or go out just as fast as it comes in, and that's a funny thing. The more,
especially with 7 kids.
Correct. Yes, that'll also put a dent in things.
So you're CEO at SecureSave. I really, really love what you guys are doing there. Financial wellness is something that is so important. In today's workforce, savings is a huge part of that, but a large share of Americans don't really have savings. Emergency, even otherwise. Share a little bit more about what SecureSave is and the organization's mission, et cetera.
Yeah. So in my tenure in building financial technology products, talked to a lot of people, studied a lot of different areas, and one thing that was always interesting to me was in the U.S. The savings rate in the U.S. is constantly quite low. It's just almost historically low now. It's pretty close to some of the historical lows, but we're also lower than most other developed countries. We also have more debt. It's like our relationship and our interaction with money in the U.S. is very unique, but we have some very bad, consistently bad habits, and one of them is short-term savings. And what's also unsurprising is we are very stressed. Americans are traditionally very stressed people.
Right.
And we're stressed over money, and we're stressed over short-term money matters. And so obviously there's a link there. And, you and I have been building companies and leading people long enough to know that stress shows up at work. And I have always felt that, and have seen this in leading teams, if you could help people be more successful with their money and get less stressed over it, and that doesn't mean just paying them more. That doesn't mean you shouldn't pay them fairer wages, but people will spend what they earn. You have to help them really improve their relationship with money, improve their management with it. But what I've learned is that you can't just teach people about money. You have to really actually give them the tools. You have to make it easy for them to be successful. And really the heart of that for most people is just to start saving and to start saving short term. Just have a little bit of money set aside in case something goes awry. And little things go awry all the time. Tire blows out, you get a ticket, an appliance breaks, your kid needs to go to the doctor and you have to skip a shift at work. That will cost you money that you didn't have. That's an emergency. And those little situations cause a lot of stress. They impact work. And on top of that, it leads to a really negative cascading effect of financial consequences. People take money out of their retirement fund when they shouldn't. They take payday loans. They carry credit card debt. And so really that short-term savings gap is really the key to reducing stress, improving productivity and reducing stress at work, and also creating this positive cascade effect in your financial life. And so emergency savings really is like this key to so many things. And with SecureSave, we're trying to make it easier, faster, and more rewarding for people to save. And we do that through the workplace, because when you go through the workplace, it helps unlock a lot of different capabilities that make it easier, more automated, and more rewarding to save.
It's a huge part of relationships too. I mean, what happens at work often we carry with us, we bring home, right? What happens at home we carry with us, we bring into work.
Yep.
It's an enormous stressor, I think, that contributes to sort of relationship conflict. So not just at work, right, and losing productivity at work, but also at home. And then for so many people, those things commingle.
Yeah, it is. And it goes back to why money is so emotional, because there's that kind of relationship charge that comes with it for a lot of people, right? How do I tell my spouse I need to take off a shift because, our kid's sick and I couldn't get coverage, or,
right.
I need it. My mom is sick and she's, another country or, another state, and I need to book a flight and I know we can't afford it, but and then there's a lot of elements that these unexpected expenses and these situations that occur. But even a dumb thing like a dishwasher, it may seem like a trivial thing, but I've had this in my life where the dishwasher broke and, my wife and I were fighting about, well, who's going to do the dishes now? And, we can't afford to fix it until the next paycheck, but it's backed up and we've got little kids and so it creates these issues and these situations that are really, really hard.
Right. And for a lot of the workforce that is hourly or on contract, when they're not working, they're not earning. So when you have these, these problems that come up where if you're lacking those short-term savings, now you're having to choose between, if I have to go somewhere to take care of a loved one for a short period of time, having to choose between that and work. I mean, there are real implications now on how, your work environment can contribute to, a better life at home
And I think employers are more in tune with this. I mean, I think for a long time they would offer benefits that they felt like they had to for competitive standpoints. And I think in recent years, there's definitely been the shift to what will actually make a positive impact on the well-being of our employees, because employers recognize that comes back to work and in a positive
100%.
way. It improves retention, it improves productivity, and especially in the case of stress, and especially in financial stress, our research has shown that if people are financially stressed and they don't have emergency savings, they will miss shifts. They'll leave early, they'll show up late, or they'll just miss it entirely because they're dealing with some situation. And so
Yeah.
employers are much more in tune of this, and they're trying to figure out how to solve it. And I think over the years, folks in the C-suite of bigger companies who are completely disconnected from this in a lot of effect, they either never lived this reality or just haven't lived it in a long time, are now understanding the impact that this can have, and they're investing in it. And so recently, that has shown up in the case of what we do, workplace emergency savings. And so big companies are out there launching these programs and seeing great success. And we're excited about that. And we think this is going to be a big trend over the next 5 to 10 years.
100%. Couldn't agree more. I mean, especially sitting in this seat that I'm sitting in,
Yeah.
I see the same things that you see. I think it has been, you know, a fairly natural evolution since the late 70s. I think coming out of that world into sort of this market culture of the 80s and ladder climbing, which sort of led us into this 90s,
Yeah.
world of where we started to hear a lot about things like work-life balance, right? That sort of spilled over into the um, into the 2000s, right? A lot
Yeah.
about wellness, a lot about workplace culture, and then COVID happened, and then the Great Resignation happened, right? And so it's been this, I think, slow burn for about 25 years, and then it started picking up a lot of pace, until really this new generation of workers that is, I think, highly motivated, far more by, I think, more of an experiential factor at work
Yeah.
than I think our parents
Yeah.
were.
Well, I think they look to their employer to help them more than our parents did, right?
This is a good point. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
And I think that there's a trend line there, and especially the younger generation, they're looking for more help and support. But what's interesting, there's still this trend that people don't want to talk about money at work. They don't want to talk to their HR people or their boss about their money situation. They don't want them to see it. And I've had this. I remember, one time the last company I was at was helping run this business. We had a really good, diverse workforce all over the world. And one of our sales people, very highly compensated, very good at what she did, she's probably 40 years old. She came to us one day and she needed $3,000 before her next paycheck. And you could tell she was just mortified to have this conversation with us, but she had nowhere else to go. And what happened was she was in an abusive relationship and no one knew it. And the night before, it had gone too far and she moved out and she slept in her car with her kid the night before that. And she needed to get first and last month's rent to get a new safe place to be. And myself and one of the other executives are sitting there with the HR leader listening to this, like, holy cow. And we helped through the situation. We tried to support it. But it was one of those things like, how many times does something like this happen and they don't come to us because of just how incredibly humbling, humiliating, and difficult it was for this woman to do it, and how bad things must have gotten for that situation. And the reality is most people, they don't come to their boss on those
That's
situations.
right.
They grin and bear it. How's it work?
Yeah.
How's it home? Great. Everything's fine. Back to work.
Right.
Leave me alone. And
Yeah.
that's how most people get through their day. That's something that I hope that with an emergency savings program, it's a way that employers can provide that support without having to have those awkward conversations that people don't want to have, that they know that the employer is there to support them in those situations. But it's kind of, the support is there, but you take care of what you need to, and no need to come to me for permission or approval.
So we talk a lot about solving people problems here at Mustard Hub.
Yep.
If you could distill for, maybe some listeners, what kind of people problems does SecureSave solve?
Yeah, so a few different things. And it depends on what's important to the employer, and we can really kind of focus with them. In no particular order, one of the areas that really has been driving emergency savings as a workplace benefit is actually retirement. There's also a retirement readiness problem in this country, so long-term savings as well. And a lot of workers are just not on pace to retire. And since the pandemic, especially, they're taking out more loans, more hardship withdrawals, and they're struggling to contribute and participate into the retirement programs. And when the workplace retirement is your number one form of becoming retirement ready, that's a problem. And so there's very clear data that shows workers that have emergency savings are less likely to take out loans and hardship withdrawals. They're more likely to contribute, and they're more likely to increase their participation. That extrapolated over your career is going to lead to a way more retirement ready worker. And so that's actually where emergency savings as a concept came from, is through research on retirement. But a few other areas that we've highlighted, people that are less stressed over their finances, and that's tied to having more emergency savings, miss less work. And so for a lot of employers, that's good enough. That, like, the retirement stuff, put it aside. If I can get people to save more money in an emergency savings account, and that's proven that they will show up and leave early less, they'll show up more and leave early less, like, that's a fantastic ROI.
Yeah,
Combined
that's a
with
great outcome.
great outcome. But a lot of it just comes down to, it's a very popular benefit that gets incredibly high adoption, and it's sticky. And so for some employers, they're just looking for something that's high impact, high utilization, good retention, that's a feel good benefit that works for their employees. So it really just kind of depends on what the employer is looking to address.
I love that. Talking about these employers, what kind of organizations do you work with? Tell me more about who SecureSave is for, and why do they choose, SecureSave versus other options?
Yeah. So a few things. We work with employers of all sizes. So we work with companies that have, a handful of employees to several hundred
Really?
thousand employees.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's kind of like health savings accounts. Health savings accounts are meant for organizations of all sizes.
Okay.
Say with a 401k, they can kind of be structured differently and have different components, but the biggest company in the world to the smallest company can both have HSAs or 401ks, and workplace emergency savings is the same. But some of the common attributes are they have a majority of their workforce is low to moderate income. And moderate income can still reach well into the six figures, and a lot of it depends on where they're located. But these are healthcare companies, manufacturing, services businesses. We work more and more with schools and folks like that. And so these are organizations, again, that lots of low to moderate income workforces, and they have a lot of the problems that we've talked about. They're keyed into financial well-being, retirement readiness. They're also looking at what will actually resonate with my staff and my team, and what will actually potentially have a positive ROI, and not just another benefit that I feel like I have to offer, but what's something that's going to drive a positive outcome. And that's where we're really having good success. We also sell through banks and record keepers. So we work with folks like Voya, Transamerica, Truist, HSA Bank, and we help them provide emergency savings programs to the employers that they support.
Oh, really? Okay. So, something interesting, right, to note, SecureSave has a very deep bench when it comes to financial expertise, and you have a very public and highly regarded personal finance expert on board, right? Susie Orman. She's a
Yep.
co-founder of
Yep.
SecureSave, right?
She is.
What is it like working with a personal finance celebrity?
Yeah, Susie's interesting. So if you know anything about Susie, you'll know that she's been beating the drum of the importance of emergency savings for years. But she also, this concept of talking to people about money in emotional terms and kind of appealing to their emotions, was something that she really kind of helped pioneer to a great effect. When money books and books around investing and stuff were all written by older financial services men, kind of speaking to the ones and zeros, she really came out and spoke to the emotions. She spoke to
Right.
women, and she really had a very different take. And she's talked in black and white and had an edge, and she has an edge. That's who she is. But she's also at a point in her career where she's looking to make an impact. She's written a lot of books. She's had her own TV show. She's got a very successful podcast. She's done very well for herself. She's looking to make an impact. And she saw SecureSave when she got introduced to myself and our other co-founder, Bassam. Loved the vision, loved the brand, loved the focus, and the mission that we were trying to do, and was basically sold immediately. And I had never met Susie, had no interaction with her. Her and I and our other co-founder, Bassam, are very different, but she's been a blast to work with. She's very good at keeping us focused, staying on mission. She's got a great innate sense of people and people around their money. Has been really helpful with just doing anything that we can think of around, whether it's a webinar or podcasts or just content that we deliver, as well as product and kind of strategic insights and thinking to the business. And so she's been involved since before we launched, and still very involved today, and very much the same way.
I love that. So who else do you admire in the space? For those who are working on building up their personal finance literacy, who should they be reading, watching, etc.?
That's a good question. I'll plug Susie's books big time. I don't know
They're
people by
good.
name. I'm terrible with names. There's some really interesting new podcasters that are out there that I think are speaking well to the younger generation. And I wish I could name some of these people because I want to do them justice, but I can't off the top of my head. Yeah, so sorry, whoever you are out there. But I would say, there are some folks out there that I think are doing well by breaking down how people actually spend. Like I have this with my 17-year-old. She said the other day, it's like, oh, I really want to have like a lake house when I'm older. Do you have any concept of how astronomically expensive some things in life really are? Like, let's start with what a car costs and insurance, and let's build from there. I just don't think people have any clue what other people make, what they spend, what their financial situation is. And so, I give a big kudos to folks that are out there that are kind of telling these personal stories. Like, this is what the world costs and how hard it is. And don't be disappointed if you're just trying to get by and you're living a basic life. That's fine. That's what most people do.
Yeah.
And I think that's what social media has been good for. It does better to expose some of those things.
In a way, in fact, I was going to mention that, it goes to show how important I think financial literacy is, starting young, from a young age, to understand a lot of these things. And social media can certainly help. I mean, social media also can not help. I mean, there's plenty of things
correct.
out there
Yeah,
that showcase individuals doing things that cost astronomical amounts of money, right? But it really can help, and there are a lot of ways for young people to get educated to do things that they need to be doing in order to avoid or to afford that lake house.
I'll tell you one thing I don't like is, like, to that effect, these TikTokers and stuff that'll go out and like find rich people and like, what did you do to make your first million? And how much money did you make in a day? Those people are very, very rare. And they've also made trade-offs in life. And I think that that's an unfair character. Like, ask them what they gave up. How many divorces have you had? Have you ever declared bankruptcy? Right? Like, that's the reality of the world is that, again, money is just a tool. It's not the end goal of what you're trying to achieve.
That's a pretty amazing. If anybody takes something away from this chat,
go do that.
This is very true, and something that definitely gets overlooked a lot. Right, success can often come at a price, and it can be an expensive price, right?
Correct.
And maybe not necessarily one tied to money, but to a lot of other things, right? But back to some of these people problems. So, a workforce facing economic insecurity, is obviously one, but what are other pressing people problems maybe that you see sort of in business? So I'm interested maybe like, around focus, work-life balance, context and prioritization, I'm curious.
Yeah. I mean, at a general level, I think, just the digital world we live in and stuff, and, the big push to return to office. I saw a survey the other day that was very, very exhaustive that basically showed, especially in like tech and a lot of jobs where you don't physically have to be there, they're still working like almost 3 days a week from home.
Yeah.
And I think that there is an element of you're always on. And, when I was growing up as a professional, went to the office every day, you were there at 8, you left at 5 or 6. And it was just, that was it. And like, you kind of knew how to work. But now I don't think younger people know how to work. I don't think they know how to do this. And I do think there's an element of bringing them in person that's helpful, that they're missing, but they're not getting it. And I don't know if they're going to get it. And so I don't know if we know how to teach people to work anymore in a weird way.
This is really interesting too. And it might sort of reflect how a lot of these people problems are culture problems in a way, right? Boiling down to some misalignment between, I think, what these organizations think their people want to need versus what they actually want to need versus, what the people, what they're surrounded by, what they know, what they've been brought up experiencing, And so those three things are, there's probably some Venn diagram, where they all intersect, but employers don't necessarily know where that is.
Yeah. And I think it's hard. So intentionality for me is a really important thing about culture. Intentionality and focus. You have to be very intentional about how you do things and how you run the business and how you communicate and what you're working on and why you're working on it. And that I think will help you stay focused on how you communicate, how you work, how you set expectations, how you lead people, how you communicate to them, and how you pick and choose what you're going to work on, because you can't do everything, and you can't be great at more than just one thing potentially. But I
Yeah.
think it's hard in today's world. I mean, and things change so fast. I mean, even just you know, I saw a stat on like mobile phone usage that a decade ago we might use our phone an hour a day, and now it's like if you're using it less than 3 or 4 hours a day, you're doing good. And I think that's just the amount of distractions and lack of focus that we have, and
Mhm.
I think there's just things have changed, and we're all kind of that frog in the boiling water, right? Like we don't realize how much the water is boiling around us versus what it was before. And I think that that's our culture and how we work and how we live and how we interact, and especially again post pandemic, we've never really kind of figured out what the new world is supposed to look like. I think as a leader of any organization, that is really hard. Like, how do you be intentional about
Mhm.
your organization? How do you keep them focused? How do you help them prioritized?
You know,
And the generations are super different these days.
very. There's, every organization, well, maybe not every organization, but, most organizations have some kind of values, right? As part of their mission or their core
Yeah,
DNA of who
yeah,
they are. And a lot of these values and culture are often an obstacle, right? The misalignment between these values and the culture, right? It often can be a real obstacle, I think, to success and
yeah.
to growth. Is that something you see in a lot of areas within organizations? Whether it's with, the other benefits they provide, operations, tech, sales, et cetera. I mean, do you see that really getting in the way?
Um, I don't. It's, so we have a very intentional kind of mission, vision, principles in our company, and we try and lead to that. I push it, but the key is that you have to be exceptionally consistent, and just like
Yes.
it's a drumbeat, you have to keep at it, and you have to really push it out to the people and tell them and let them run with it. And I always say that culture really comes from the middle. Like it doesn't at some level it comes from the top, but it really percolates through an organization through the middle, because that's the group that's connected to the top that can hear it and understand what they want you to do. But it's the middle that pushes it to the bottom and maintains
100%.
it. And so it's our job as leaders to, I think, continue to kind of make sure that that middle is driving it. And that's, you can see that in an organization. If like one of our biggest clients, for example, the contact that we work with, um, you can tell that that organization does a good job of what I'm describing. Like the senior leadership has a very defined culture, has a very defined, and they push it to that middle management, and they say run with it, and give them the freedom, give them the dollars, give them the time and the resources and the flexibility, and they push it out to the rest of the organization. And it's really cool to see when that works. But then you see it the opposite, where you have like, for example, return to office will come from the top. We need to do return to office. And then that middle layer fights it. Middle layer is like, well, I'm going to protect my people over here because I can't get my job done. And you can see that tension in organizations at
Yeah.
times. And I think it shows up when you pay attention to the middle.
Do you feel like SecureSave is maybe one of these tools, these tools of financial wellness that can really help, I think, create more of that alignment and consensus between the top and the middle, and the bottom, that sort of cultural alignment to try and, help. I mean, generally speaking, a lot of these values are, about, have some sort of
Yeah.
collaborative effect to them and support, and so forth. Um, as a tool, right, and being able to close this short-term savings gap, right, that can help increase productivity and all of these other things that you've talked about, seems like something that can really be almost instructive, right?
Yeah. And so some of the organizations that we work with, where, we can see that where that middle layer, is empowered and
Mhm.
has been given that capability to really run with something because they're closer to that group at the bottom, or, however you want to think about it. Right. I don't like the top
Right.
to bottom necessarily analogy, but, if you're the C suite in a very large company, you don't have the financial problems that necessarily we're talking about. Maybe you have in the past, but you're
Mhm.
in a very different world and situation set and problem set.
Right.
But the people in the middle are not necessarily. If you're running HR for even a Fortune 500 company, you're probably not too well disconnected from that life. You might still be living it yourself. You likely are, actually, but you're definitely one walk down the hallway or one walk down into the factory, and you're dealing with those problems. And
Right.
so those organizations with the C-suite is saying, hey, head of benefits, or our retirement leader, or total rewards leader, or even just the HR business partner that's given capability to make recommendations, trusting them that they are close and they know what's best for the people, and don't fight it, right? Um, Give them the power, the authority, and the capability, and then listen to them. And we see those organizations all the time, and they have phenomenal success, not just with our program, but we see that across the board. They're usually leading, within their industries. They're leading and innovators in benefits and in, human capital management capabilities.
Yeah.
Like it's really, again, empowering and leading from the middle that I think is important. But that does start from the top. That culture is set by the top.
So,
And
right.
and that's a key thing. You have to, it's one thing to kind of give lip service to, like, we're going to empower our people. You really actually have to do it. And it especially in a digital remote world and stuff where you're not all in one office, and it feels odd, I think, to a lot of people.
It's one thing I wanted to bring up because I 100% agree that it really, does, that culture does happen, does get developed, does get, built, I guess, to some degree, by the middle. But at the end of the day, a lot of the misalignment, some of these people problems can be, probably are to some extent, a leadership problem, because at the end of the day, the leaders are the one that builds those conduits, right? That helps empower that middle management to be able to do the things, that leaders want them to do in order to build that culture. You talked about empowering them, right, and
Yeah.
creating these mechanisms, right, or this way for them to be able to just run with it. And a lot of leaders don't do that, right?
No.
So, I mean, that's still a critical piece there, to make sure that the leaders are giving their teams the things that they need to do, right, in order to, support it the way it needs to be supported.
Yeah. Agreed. Um,
Uh, Tell me some of the common traits that you see stand out in leaders, when those that really truly get it right with their people.
I
You
go
can,
back to the
present company included. You can actually use
yeah.
your own examples.
I think it goes back to intentional and focus. Just started with there, like they are intentional about what they do, what they say, how they communicate, and they're focused on what they're working on. Like, they're not all over the map. They're not trying to solve every problem that the organization has, and they're good at prioritizing. But in order to do that, what goes without saying, you have to be a great communicator, great listener.
Right.
But I think it's a little bit different in my experience than what I always expected that to mean. I thought great communicator was like, I have to have these inspiring messages, and I have to be, very clear and concise and stand on a stage. But actually, really, what it means is being consistent and using normal language, and consistency in the sense of, I'm going to say the same thing over and over and over again. I'm going to say the same message and give the same, um, show the same slide. I'm going to give the same one liner. I'm going to tell the same story. And when the team starts making fun of me for saying it so much, I know that I'm starting to actually say it enough. It sounds odd, but like, you see this in some of the most successful politicians or some of the most successful athletes. Like, they're wildly consistent in how they communicate and what they're focused on, and how they behave, and the patterns that they have. And that's because people are so wicked distracted right now, and
Yeah.
it's so hard to grab their attention. Back to the comment of, people are on their phones way more hours a day than they used to be. And so I think as a communicator, it's one of those things where, um, again, you have to really be, I think you have to study it, I guess is the way I would put it. Like, don't think about, like, the classic, again, I have to give a great speech or write the perfect email. Like, no, really study what makes a great communicator historically, and what they did and how they did it. And a lot of it comes down to consistency and clarity.
Yeah. I would agree 100%. It's also some of the things that make the best teachers.
Yes.
There's a very famous old saying by Aristotle that was, a teacher's job is to, you know, basically explain the same thing over and over and over and over and over again until the student figures it out for themselves.
Yeah. I remember
And
I
the
had
reality is that when you do say it so much and you are that consistent, you know what I mean? I think that who you're talking to, right? All of the employees, your team members, everybody starts to understand that message, right? And they start to live those things, and then they can make fun of you for it.
Yeah. One as an example, I had a high school, two quick stories. A high school teacher who would say on Friday afternoons, have fun, stay safe, come back to school with a smile on your face. I don't remember what he taught. I don't remember his name.
That's good.
And I kind of remember the classroom a little bit, but I remember verbatim what he said every Friday. And it stuck with us over the weekend. We had another college professor when I was building race cars. You know, he'd love to BS and hang around in the shop, which is what engineers do sometimes. But eventually he would stand up and he would say, well, I'm going to go out into the lab and do something, even if it's wrong. And he would say that over and over and over again. But it was, both of those were the permission to and reminder, have fun, be safe, but I need you to come back. Like, stay safe is the important part. And with my professor in school, it's okay to make mistakes. We have to go do something. Like, at some point, go do something. And even if it's wrong, that's okay. But those two people would say those same things over and over and over again. And we would make fun of them about it. But it was out of love and admiration. But we remembered them was the key thing.
That's good.
And we absorbed it.
It is, and it's that last. I mean, well, both of them really. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
powerful message to anybody, to your not just to your team, but
Yeah.
and not just to students, but to your kids, right? Go
Correct.
do, even if it's okay to fail, it's okay to
Yes.
be wrong, because that's how you're going to grow.
Yeah, but they need to hear it a lot. They can't just hear it one
Yeah,
time, right?
they do need to hear it a lot. It's a matter of, well, my oldest child needs to hear it a lot. My youngest child, I think she already knows that.
Yeah.
She seemed to. There's some of them seem to figure it out before they're ever told.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of tech solutions in the HR space, that can be really, I think, that are really impactful for organizations when it comes to recruiting,
Yeah.
retaining talent, fostering culture, reinforcing core values, et cetera. Tell me some other tools and platforms that you have your eye on, right?
Yeah.
Including any products being used off-label as a tool to support culture beyond SecureSave.
Yeah. One is just anything around productivity. Like, it's hard to, there's a concept in engineering and like factories, work in progress, like what's going on. And in a factory, you can walk around the factory and you can see what's going on, what's stopped, what's going. But there's an extra level of detail, like what's moving faster than it should, what's moving slower, what's not optimized. And, one thing, anything where I can find, and I don't have great tools for it, I think part is you have to build patterns to kind of surface work in progress. And so we're constantly looking at tools that help us. I was just like kind of classic project management tools, communication tools, data sharing tools that just allow you to see, especially in an information worker setting, like what are they doing? What's going on? And where do I have slows and stops? Where do I have efficiencies and inefficiencies? And, to be able to call them out, positive or negative, and correct them. Right. It's very hard in today's world. And
it's really hard.
I don't think there's enough being built. I don't want to go build that, by the way, but like, I don't think there's enough there. But it's heavy handed, right? Like it's a little bit, there's a cultural element too. People don't want to feel like they're being watched or overseen. And getting back to everything we talked about, it kind of comes from the top of like, this is important to us, we're going to do it. And then working with the middle to do it. Our culture is very written. And so we write things down and we try and have a lot of written artifacts of what we do. And I find that to be a really great way to do it. The AI tools is one thing. We were shocked at our last offsite, just how much AI tools have just propagated throughout the organization without us doing anything. And I think that's another area where and I might have a bit of a counterpoint to how people might think about this. It's not just like you should use AI in HR. You should learn how your team is already using AI in your organization. And I think one of the jobs that HR could have is HR in a general sense, but like, what are these tools that are being used? How are they being used? Are we okay with it? Should we support it? Should we pull back on it? And, it's kind of like in the heyday of software as a service, a lot of information technology teams were kind of taken aback by how much SaaS tools were just showing up in their organization being used. And I think right now it's kind of the same thing with AI. And I think you need to figure out who's using it, what are they
Yeah.
using, how are they using it, and how do I get in the middle of that?
Yeah.
And even just to understand it.
It's interesting, considering how nascent we are, right, and how many tools, just the vast, right, like breadth of how many tools actually even exist now,
Yeah.
and it's only been a couple of years, right,
Yeah.
until there's some, industry shakeout, right, where you see a lot of the major players sort of taking over. That would be really powerful to be able to surface, that kind of information from your team. If you work with large
Yeah.
teams, right? What's everybody using? What are they using it for? And how effective is it? But
Yeah.
to your point about work in progress, this is something we've thought a lot about too. Also, something I don't want to build. So if anybody's listening to this,
Go for it. Yeah.
being able to surface those kind of insights about work in progress, so you can just kind of understand. You made a good comment about people don't want to feel like they're being watched. At the same time, if the team understands where the team is at all times, I mean,
Yeah.
that's really powerful information that I don't think anybody has really nailed yet.
No, not at all. And part of it is everything's moving so fast, or work patterns continue to change so much that as soon as you built such a tool, it'd have to rapidly evolve. So, but yeah, I think that visibility into what's happening, especially just at the pace of change in organizations. Not all organizations are going to change that rapidly, but
Right.
I think a lot of them will, and people will be surprised by it. And all of a sudden, something will break, or something will radically improve, and you won't know why.
Yeah.
and and I think if I'm in that middle layer, like I'm kind of afraid of that. Like if I'm in the C-suite, definitely afraid if something breaks and I don't know why. But I always tell people that work for me, I hate surprises. Don't ever surprise me. That's like one
Yeah.
easy thing. But I think it's very easy to be surprised these days based on the
Yeah.
speed and complexity of organizations.
I
And
agree.
that's I think something that, again, worth being attentive to.
So tying back to SecureSave, I want to hear about a story, team, a client, an experience, that experienced a turning point of some kind, right? Good or bad, with a change in their financial wellness benefit offerings. How did that impact the organization's culture? Was it measured in some way?
Yeah. We're actually putting together a story right now with a franchise in Montana. They run a bunch of like quick service
Okay.
oil change locations. And so
Okay.
you can imagine kind of who's working there. It's a bunch of younger, mostly young men, some women, but very young, right? Like, these are people in their late teens, 20s, 30s, very high turnover, not great pay, okay benefits, and an ownership group that is trying to be stand out. They're trying to put together a compelling offer for people in their community, and
Hmm.
they're trying to retain them for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
And they launched with us a couple of years ago, actually. So this is not a new client, and they came to us with the expressed interest of like improving retention. And they designed a program with us that was really optimizing for retention. And they hit my radar, back to being surprised. Luckily, it was a positive one. The team came to me, and this is kind of a small surprise, but it was a good one. Say, hey, we just heard from this client, and they called us out of the blue, and they want to relaunch the program and add more incentive. We're like, well, that's great news. What happened? It's very successful. They're having a great run with retention, and so they want to add more money into the program and invest more into it. And so they were going to pull back on some other programs that we're doing that just weren't utilized. It's not that we're going to cancel stuff; they weren't as appealing to this working group. And so it was a great testament to an employer that was, 2 years ago, this was a concept, even just how fast things change, workplace emergency savings. I think they stumbled upon it. We're like, never heard of this. This sounds interesting. Took a risk on something new to see if it would work, invested into it. It worked effectively, and they're doubling down on that. And, I think that's not an uncommon story that we hear from our customers, but that one's
Yeah.
very unique. So
That's a really good one, and really, really telling, considering the industry and the type of shop is
correct.
not,
Yeah.
Historically not one that has invested in that way
Yeah.
in those type of, hourly workers, for
Yeah.
example. So, that's a testament to how powerful, SecureScape can be.
Yep.
or investing in these kind of short-term savings. So when you think about the future, what would you say to business leaders? What should they be thinking about when it comes to financial wellness for their workforce?
A lot of it is you got to get people to take action and stick with it. And I think that's been somewhat the trend that we've had over the last decade, which is that it was about teaching people about financial literacy, helping coach them through situations and engage with them. And back to the conversation we had a few minutes ago, people don't want to talk about their finances at work. They don't want to talk to a coach. Not to say there's no value for those. We work with great coaching platforms, but really the starting point is you have to get people to take action, and that action has to be something that's going to be. It has to be something that is clearly going to be a positive. There are definitely financial products out there that they're going to take action on, but are they really going to be helpful for those employees? And with the case of emergency savings, there's no doubt the research is clear. This is a net positive through and through for your employee, and it's a net positive for the employer. But more importantly, they're going to take action and they're going to stick with it. Then what we have found is that these other solutions can kind of come after that, right? If you actually help someone start saving, you're going to reduce that stress. You're going to build their financial momentum. You're going to create a positive immediately. Then they're going to be much more receptive. Great. I'll talk to a coach. Great. I'll take this class. Great. I'll increase my participation in my 401k. It's really a gateway to much more positive set of situations. And so whether it's emergency
gateway benefit,
it's a great way to benefit. But whether it's emergency savings or something else, you need stuff that people are going to use and stick with. And I think that's the trouble these days. We talk to so many benefits and rewards leaders who are like, hey, we've got this thing and that other thing. People just aren't using them. We thought they were, and they sound really compelling, but people don't use them. And I think that's going to be the biggest litmus test, to find that stuff that's just not getting used and not being retained by employees. Because there's some stuff that sounds great, and then it just diminishes. And we hear that often as well. And you're not going to improve financial well-being unless they adopt it and stick with it. So it's that simple.
Last question, or topic really that I kind of wanted to, just touch on. You have an opportunity to chat with a business leader. They come to you on advice on how to, get it right when it comes to growing and retaining their team or taking care of their people. You have just a second, right, before they turn around and walk out the door. What's that one last thing that you would tell them about getting it right before you never saw them again?
Get good data.
Good data.
Understand what is going on with your people. What do they really care about, want, need? Don't make assumptions. Don't listen to outsiders, so I wouldn't pitch them. Just another data point. So get good data. And the employers that we work with that I think are having great outcomes, again, not just with us, but we see it in other solutions and other things they're doing. They have low turnover, happy employees. They're succeeding in the markets. They're growing, they're successful. They have good data, and they went through the hard work to get that data. And they, again, back to a lot of what we talked about, like they have leaders that told them, go get good data, go understand it, go study it. And, and they're empowered to do that and to do the work, the hard work, to gather it, to survey employees, to bring in outsiders to help them interpret it. And then once they do that, what's the phrase? Like, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And so just because you have good data doesn't mean you're not telling yourself, some lies, but it's better than guessing. And I think in a lot of cases, for a lot of complex organizations, understanding really what's going on in your organization, having that data, replenishing it regularly is going to, it won't do you wrong.
That's good. Yeah. I think that's really good advice. I mean, you're right. We can create, right, any kind of narrative that we want to tell that story with the data that we have. But as long as the data is good, that's a good starting point. That's good advice. Devin, thank you so much for our chat today. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me.
Thank you, Curtis. It was fun.
Yeah, you bet. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning into Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build. Please share this fireside chat and be sure to come back for our next episode. More insights are on the way. Also, check us out at mustardhub.com to see how we help companies become destinations for workplace happiness and turn culture into a competitive edge. Until next time.